welcome to Climate Asia's Conversation of Change. Today we have a special guest, Rutger de Bruijn from NexusNovus. He is the founder and CEO. Rutger is an international leading entrepreneur specializing in waste management solutions for the Indian market. A very warm welcome to you. We'll dig right into the questions. What is a typical day as the CEO and founder look like for you? And can you describe a little bit more about the work that NexusNovus does?
Let's start with the work, I presume. We promote, develop, and fund projects globally in renewable energy, waste management, water management, and for example, in India, that would be biogas predominantly or waste to energy. In South Africa, we're currently developing a project in sewage treatment, which is 4 to 8 times less power intensive. And if you knew, South Africa has a combined crisis of both power and water. It's a very dry country. And as such, solving the sewage crisis also, is an energy crisis because you just don't have it. So we focus on projects that basically have a massive impact on citizens globally, and are focused on renewable energy as a theme. It's decarbonizing and basically take back what's ours. It's taken away from us by the big oil companies. A day in my life since I now stay in South Africa. Most of my team is in India. Most of my mornings are basically coordinating with India on project site in Bangalore Airport, for example, seeing if we received the right type of waste, what's the plan for today. I will have, of course, to discuss with my team as well, from marketing to legal to anything, because there's always a steady stream of new projects that we are investing in. You keep on trying to see where things are stuck and then move them along. As an example, right now, I think we hope to close financially 5 new projects in this quarter. That's 3 biogas, 1 bioethanol, and a geothermal project in India predominantly, but also in the United States. That means that from a time zone perspective, it's all over the place. But the projects are clustered around renewable energy.
Wonderful. So you hold a master's and M.Sc in medicine and biomedical science. What are the various challenges you came across in the sector of health, and how would you describe your journey from this to being a leading international entrepreneur?
Well, I've never practiced. I started biomedical sciences and I loved it. I wasn't allowed to touch patients, so I also did medicine. I did it both side by sides. Then I completed and I thought, you know what? I'd like research. But I'd rather work in the pharma industry so I can tell researchers what we are going to invest in. And hence I did also my MBA. By pure chance, I got selected best of class at my MBA to do a business trip to India to meet the CEOs of Wipro, TCS, you name it, and decided that, you know what, screw it all. I'm going to set up my own company in India because that's the new frontier. And the day after graduation, I moved to India. The principle, however, remains the same. I wanted to be in research because unlike my parents, doing 1 patient at a time isn't ambitious enough. I'd like to have scale if you make an impact. So we don't build 1 biogas plant, we design them as an IKEA package. And we are able to fund them on a larger scale, many of them. So we don't build 1 project, we hope to build thousands of them as a franchised model. And the principle in life remained the same. I apparently like impact and I love what my parents are doing as doctors. I just don't want to do 1 project at a time. I think, the environment or patients or medicine requires a larger scale. And as such, my entire career has always been about, okay, how do we get there? So the move from medicine to waste essentially was natural. Then again, waste has a massive negative impact on the well-being of a lot of people, especially the poor in many of the countries that I work in. And the first thing you learn in medicine is that the largest invention we've ever done, right, is just washing your hands. Whatever very fantastic, smart surgeons do after that, washing your hands is 80% of the work. So just like that, focusing on projects in hygiene, which is waste management, sewage treatment plant, renewable energy, are part of basic infrastructure that are part of a just transition that is just required. And we can't allow the politicians to not implement it. So it's the same philosophy, same principles, same motivation that moved me actually into this industry.
Lovely. That sounds ambitious, very ambitious and exciting at the same time. So talking of numbers, what is the average quantity of waste generated at the Bangalore airport, and how much biogas does this eventually generate? And what are the plans that you have for all this biogas that's generated?
Yeah, so the Bangalore Airport project is designed as being cyclical. So we use e-vehicles or CNG vehicles to pick up the waste from the terminal. So next time you fly out of Bangalore or into Bangalore, know that I'll be managing your waste. Anybody listening? What then happens is that mixed waste is brought into the facility where we mechanically sort it into organic and non-organic. The non-organic are plastic, PET bottles, all the things that people leave at the airport, and we recycle all of that. Then the organics are being pushed into the biogas plant, and the biogas plant can produce both power and CNG, but we focus on CNG, that's compressed natural gas, or like I like to call it, renewable natural gas, because it's a renewable resource or fuel, upon which cars, buses, trucks can drive. So we sell that to oil companies in India that are being mandated by the government to lift off our CNG. So the infrastructure in India is available for us to produce CNG, and then trucks or buses going to a petrol station and then use actually our CNG to drive. Now, the Bangalore airport is quite ambitious to be completely climate neutral. And I think they have 99% already renewable energy as part of their mix in energy production. But their weak underbelly technically is all the buses that drive towards the airport, right? Emitting CO2. And as you may know, in India, PM 2.5, or the fine dust emissions in Delhi and Mumbai are horrendous, and allowing diesel vehicles, including buses, to remain on the roads, while you have a climate neutral solution, while you have a solution that doesn't require you to import, because don't forget, you are currently buying natural gas from Russia. You're sponsoring a tyrant fighting in Ukraine, polluting CO2. It's a multiple loss if you have the resources in India to do it yourself. So biogas is not just for tree huggers, it's geopolitical. If you produce enough of that locally, you don't need to import. You're not dependent on tyrants. You're not dependent on shockwaves in the market. You can do it yourself. On top of that, as a side product, we produce PROM, phosphor-enriched organic manure, which is technically fertilizer. Currently, India imports fertilizer on a very large scale. And then farmers are being given that, as how do you call that, on subsidized rates, and they don't use it properly, and they completely devastate the soil. At the same time, the exchange rate of India is dependent on oil prices, fertilizer prices being attainable. So if you have agricultural waste, which India has lots of, and if you don't produce CNG and or a fertilizer locally, you're basically surrendering to people that might not be your friends after all, and you're producing CO2 emissions. So from my perspective, it's real politics. It's about securing your own supply chains and reducing CO2 emissions. You don't have to be a tree hugger or go all in on CO2 emissions. It makes sense all over the board. So at the Bangalore airport, we would be producing 2 tons of CNG per day. I think that would cater to Terminal 2. Terminal 2 would be requiring, let's say, 500 to 700 kgs of LPG every day. LPG is not renewable, so we would be replacing that with a direct pipeline, and the remaining part could be sold in petrol stations to trucks, auto drivers, etc. The PROM, the fertilizer, will be sold to farmers locally.
Oh, that sounds wonderful, and I'm sure a lot of people will resonate to everything that you've just said. How does the use of technology to harness biogas from organic waste contribute to sustainable waste management practices? And could you elaborate elaborate a little bit more on the deployment of these engineering products at your company?
Yeah, well, biogas is an old technology. It has been deployed for decades in Europe right now. In India, it's coming up as well. There's nothing fancy about it per se. What we are doing, however, is that we are templating it. We are making it modular. We're making it like IKEA packages, because scale will not come in just building one plant at a time. It will come in the form of a franchise where you build thousands of exactly identical biogas plants all over the place. Just like think of what, like say, solar is doing currently. Solar is PV panels that are standardized. And if you have a standardized PV panel, any developer that might not even care about the environment can deploy it, make money, and at the same time save the planet. So what we try to do is dumb it down, standardize it, make it IKEA packages, and we attract local third-party developers and say, listen, guys, if you have a good project, I can bring the finance. I give you IKEA package technology that is modular. And at the same time, we have very advanced IT technology that uses simulators to run the entire plant in the cloud. So think about it, for example, Chernobyl. They tried to experiment with a new operational schematic and they blew up the plant. We can, like a pilot, train in our cockpit simulator and see if we can optimize our plant, if we can get more biogas out of it. We can design new plants in it. So the triangle of activities of modular finance, which is a structured way of doing it differently than currently banks are offering it in India, modular technology that is IKEA packages, and simulated big data technology, and we're also using, of course, AI to operate them more efficiently and have the next generation be more efficiently designed. So in this triangle, we can do many more projects and have a larger scale than just one plant. Bangalore Airport is a cute little project, but it's a very important stepping stone to test all these things that I'm now just saying, because the next projects are generation 2 of a very similar kind of aspect. So in that sense, from a technology perspective, I buy it off the shelf, but I'll design what we require, and it must be modular, and I must be able to have easy replacement of spare parts, so that in the end, whatever you do is simple. It's dumbed down.
No, that makes sense. NexusNovus works in India and South Africa at the moment. How does the practice of waste management differ in the two countries, and what are the respective challenges that you face so far?
Waste. By the way, I develop projects in Kenya as well, in Greece. It's waste is anywhere. It's humans produce waste, and nobody likes to clean it up. And politicians can't really win elections with just waste cutting ribbons, unless people start protesting about it. But very often, poor people are being targeted with waste overflow from a landfill, and poor people don't have a political clout. So politicians generally don't care too much about it. That's, by the way, the commonality between all countries. In the end, nobody cares about waste. It's an externality, and it's a greenhouse emitting factor. By the way, you can use NASA satellites, zoom into various landfills, and see the amount of methane being produced at those landfills. It is absurd, the amount of methane we produce on those landfills. You could electrify your entire fleet of cars in India and still produce more methane on your landfills. So it's a health hazard. It's a CO2 emitter. It is always targeting the poor. I mean, it's a poverty kind of a thing. People that live next to it remain poor, because how on earth can you go to school if you're inhaling toxic fumes all the time? If the amount of malaria around a landfill is larger than anywhere else, right? You remain poor. So it's always the poor that suffer. And that's true for sewage, that's true for clean water, that's true for electricity and aspects. So it's part of the just transition as well. You need to deliver critical infrastructure and put people on parity. If people don't have power, how can you study at night in villages? If you don't have sewage, how can you drink safely? So, and all of that compounds and will leave a few people leading, and most of the poor people not getting anywhere in life. So the commonalities are always the same. It's a poverty-related issue. There is compliance lacking, politicians that don't care about it too much, mafia very often actually doing the heavy lifting of the waste collection and then dumping it somewhere illegally, because somebody needs to do it and the mafia makes money with that. So what happened in India is that I've lobbied hard, wrong word, I listened with the government to change the paradigm from paying tipping fee to people lifting the waste to paying for waste to energy. So if you produce energy out of waste, you must do something well, otherwise you can't produce it and hence you don't get paid. Dumping is easy, waste to energy is hard. So by changing that, you basically rule out that the mafia can remain doing that. It is done by more professional developers. Now, there's a lot pro and con about waste to energy. Recycling is a good alternative, but people don't recycle, and the packaging industry will remain producing plastics that are 90% non-recyclable. So it's very often a thing I get asked about, is not the best technology on earth. I know, but don't talk to me, talk to the plastic industry. They are producing plastics that you can't recycle. Make policies and force them to use less packaging material. If you order something from Flipkart in India, I have more packaging material than the actual thing I've purchased. That will all go to the landfill, and there's no space for that. In the meantime, you've already added a lot of CO2 to the atmosphere. And now what to do with it? So waste to energy for the things you can't recycle is sadly one of the only things you can do. It's not the best, but it can be done in a very good manner. And the air that you get out of the stack is cleaner than the air in Europe, because you commit to European standards. Definitely cleaner than Delhi air or Mumbai air. So at the same time, I think that many people in many countries in Asia and Africa forget one thing very importantly, is that waste in Asia and Africa is organic, 60 to 70%, and a waste to energy incinerator doesn't work for that at all. It's like, because organics contain water to 60, 70% content. That means you're technically building a tea kettle. You're trying to burn water. That doesn't get you anywhere. It's not good for the environment, and neither is it good for your wallet, because you don't make money. So what we do, just like we do on the airport, we mechanically segregate organic waste and inorganic waste. What cannot be recycled will need to be gasified, will need to be put in a pyrolysis engine or incinerated. There are a few solutions out there, but it's the waste of the waste of the waste. After nothing else can be done with it, that's a solution for it. That's around 20% of your waste. So we're not talking about 100%, we're talking about 20%. At the same time, 70% is organic, or 60%. That has, if you've cleaned it up properly, can be easily used in a biogas tank. And a biogas tank is not waste to energy, it produces renewable natural gas. Or if you want to, power. At the same time, you also produce fertilizer. So what many countries and governments and developers are doing wrong is that they think, okay, we must do waste to energy. And then in Asia and Africa, they fail because the waste composition is not the right composition. You need to invest more to do it right. And your revenue driver will be from biogas as renewable natural gas, not necessarily from the power you produce. So just like that, many of my discussions with governments are about, okay, you may have been looking at this the wrong way. You need an integrated system where you do a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a little bit of that. That's very capital intensive. I can bring the money, but you need to have the policies in line that allow us to do the right thing versus the mafia to do the wrong thing. You need to plug the holes in your legal framework. So part of my job is also to really explain to governments and or local stakeholders that they can pressure the government to do the right thing and provide a framework allowing investors to put in the money, because you're not going to clean the planet unless you have money applied to it. And I think this is a very important bridge towards another aspect. We use a type of export finance. It's complicated, but it's a structured type of export finance. And this has been used, or is the predominant fund structure for oil companies for the last 200 years. So what we are doing, right? We are using their financial methods against them. If you really think about it, they have been allowed to pollute for 200 years. Now we need to really try to dry up their fund resources and utilize those fund resources to actually build critical infrastructure that repairs what they have done. So we take back what's ours, technically.
Wonderful. Thank you for the comprehensive response. I'm sure a lot of us would learn a thing or two about waste. So you've spoken a bit about vehicles using fossil fuels. What strategies can be implemented to shift vehicles in Bangalore city or in any city in India to utilizing renewable natural gases?
I think it very often starts with the right incentives. It's not necessarily just infrastructure that you can charge at home. Bangalore has a massive issue, obviously. If you've ever been to Bangalore, you know it's gridlock all over the place. You don't have parking. There are so many problems with that. And if you don't have parking, where would you charge your vehicle outside of your own home? Then again, people in India don't travel necessarily very long intercity distances. You might fly. If you can afford a car, very often you can afford a ticket between Mumbai and Bangalore, and you'd rather fly because it's just more convenient. Now, obviously, Mumbai, Delhi highway is being opened right now. It's a 10-lane for short durations, but it will take some time before local farmers that didn't get any provisions on actually crossing it properly will cross it not properly again, and you'll have these kind of highways right through villages where at Friday night people are drunk on the highway itself or using their ox car without lights going against traffic. So once again, right, you can build a beautiful highway, but then you don't take care of the poor people, and the poor people will eventually just cross the highway, right? And then you can't drive fast. So just like that, incentivize people to, for example, buy e-vehicles. Now, e-vehicles need to be imported because India doesn't produce e-vehicles. And import duties on vehicles is very high. So there's zero incentive for people to buy it. There's no charging stations, even though you can't even park. So what you will see, right, is with the European Union, of course, technically banning ICE vehicles from 2030, 2035 onwards, you'll see that a lot of countries will start moving, or a lot of manufacturers start moving away from ICE engines to battery-based vehicles, and that will drop down the price. Eventually, you will see that the Teslas of this world also set up, production facilities in India, and you need that kind of supply, but you also need the demand. So what India needs to do is, for example, offer rebates on solar panels on rooftops, just like they've done now for heaters. Allow people to produce these things at home. Put rebates in order for e-vehicles all together. However, what India has been doing, right, because it's much easier to implement, is forcing the fleets of autos towards CNG. Buses in Delhi, for example, are on CNG. That's a much easier implementation because you just add a kit to it and you use the same charging points. Basically, a petrol station is a charging point from that perspective. And you have native capacity to produce CNG because you've got so much equi-waste. So from a strategic perspective, whatever you think of the Modi government, and I don't want to have a political discussion about these kind of things, what they have recognized is that it's in their own best strategic interest to develop the CNG market locally, because it caters once again to the three factors I've discussed earlier. It reduces your import requirements, which is good for the exchange rate. It pollutes less. Now, from a CO2 perspective, I don't even know if India cares about that. Even if they do, it might very often just be on paper. But they do care about PM 2.5, the fine dust that diesel vehicles produce, because that impacts people directly in Delhi and Mumbai and all over the place. The fact that Indian cities are so badly polluted, that wins votes, right? So reducing the smog levels in Delhi by these kind of measures, by changing vehicles out into CNG, which is 90% less PM 2.5, that's a political win. So it's much easier for India to convert vehicles to CNG than it may be for actual e-vehicles, unless the West invests so much money in e-vehicles that the e-vehicles are so cheap that it can be imported into India and still make sense. So it will take some time for that infrastructure to be developed. But with CNG, you can see that with the right kind of willpower and the right kind of incentives, the Indian government can really move well and properly. Now, I'm copying this in other countries. So for example, in South Africa, I'm suggesting, hey guys, listen, you will never be able to develop a biogas industry unless you have a standard off-taker. But you don't have currently any vehicles in South Africa that drive on CNG. So why don't we do city by city? I convert for you all the buses and the government vehicles, right? For as long as the government takes from me my CNG at predefined rates. So I create the demand, I create supply, and you have a market that can be developed by other promoters or like me. So in the end, right, it's supply and demand that you need to create overnight to make a dent. And e-vehicles, I just don't see that happening with the congested cities in India immediately. CNG already happened, and you see really why they're doing it. The incentives are aligned.
Yeah, that makes sense. How has your personal experience working in project management, consultancy, marketing, and finance influenced your development as an entrepreneur, particularly in the field of waste management? And what insights and guidance would you have for any aspiring entrepreneurs looking to make an impact?
First of all, I've never worked in my life, right? I've always been self-employed, so I wouldn't know what my experience would have led me anywhere else. I've started my company the day after graduation. What entrepreneurs in the environmental sector may need to understand is, where's the money? I may be, an environmentalist, and I may have social causes that I really aspire to. In the end, you need capitalism to get things done. You might not agree with it, but you need to have money to pay for all this critical infrastructure. And as such, go into segments where there is scope for you to easily plug all of that. So for example, in India, there is money to be made in CNG. The government has done their job of setting the framework. Now, the only thing you need is the resources, basically waste from agricultural production or municipalities. You need the technology in between, and you need finance. But now it's much easier, right? You already have an offtake. You already know how you can sell your stuff. You need to collect your raw materials. So your question of whom to sell to and where to get my stuff from becomes where to get my stuff from. Now, what we do is the modular finance, modular technology, and our IT solutions, right? The simulator, that together makes it even simpler. If there is an entrepreneur in India that has potentially the opportunity to find agricultural waste, he can get a contract from, let's say, a sugarcane industry factory that has a lot of biogas or a lot of fresh mud left over. That's a waste product. If you have a contract like that and you can source land close by enough, as a franchise, I can plug in the rest. If you, for example, compare that to McDonald's, is an easiest way to think about it. If you had a corner store at M.Sc Road, right, in South Mumbai, and you know there will be footfall, you already have your land and your location established, right? You have your supply of people and your demand. The only thing you need is McDonald's to give you the finance and the machines to actually flip those burgers and sell it to people. What you needed was land and or the location, and the rest is franchised. So that is what we're trying to do in biogas, bioethanol, geothermal, waste to energy, solar, dumb it down, standardize it, and allow local promoters to just focus on what they can cover instead of having to figure out everything in one go. Because there's one thing that's very hard is keeping all those froggies, right? All the things that want to move all over the place in your car at the same time and get financial closure. It's really hard. It took me 10 years to get this project done. So, but all the while trying to invest in standardizing it. So entrepreneurs that would like to make a dent, try to focus on industries that they can get familiar with, understand the technology, obviously, but focus on the things that you can control and then outsource the rest, if that makes any sense.
Thank you. Now, more on a personal note, if you could share how you manage your work-life balance, having business in India, living in South Africa, and also how do you unwind from work, and if you have any books or podcasts you're listening to that you'd recommend.
Yeah. Okay, so the way I work, or the way my brain works, I need downtime. I call it hammock time, where I just sit down in my hammock and chill. That's part of work as well. If I don't chill or go up the mountains behind me, or get on my bicycle or work out, I die. I can't be productive. What I'm doing is a creative process. If I put in 20 hours, I can easily do it one day, but the next day, of course, I lose. I'm less productive. So I obviously know that currently people talk about life-work balance. And I think it's very important because people might have forgotten what it's all about. But if you are in a creative industry, and most of us that would listen to you are, right? You're not in changing climate industry if you don't have the creative skill sets. By working like a donkey doesn't get you anywhere, because there are no openings for donkeys. There are openings for people that can deliver, and you can only deliver if you're mentally and physically stable. So one of the biggest things that I've noticed is that I use, for example, WhatsApp for everything I do, much quicker than email, which I utterly detest. But obviously people keep on WhatsApping, after working hours, right? So my phone switches off at 5 p.m. And I'm no longer available. If, for example, my factory burns down in India while I'm in South Africa, listen, there's nothing I can do regardless, right? The local team will have to solve it, and the next morning I'll get the damage report and we'll take it from there. The cards get dealt every day, and I got a bad card. So, but let's focus on that. There's nothing that I can't do at 8 a.m. in the morning that must have been done 9 p.m. the last night. Unless, of course, there are deadlines, unless, of course, then extraordinary circumstance. Yes, of course, I'll put in. But if it's always like that, then you don't plan your day properly. Plan properly, know what you want, know especially what you don't want, set your priorities straight, and allow yourself to have a specific balance in life. If you don't, I don't think you can be creative. There's no glory in getting in the most hours. There's glory in getting things done, I believe. And people have got that completely confused. That entire hustling culture is evil. I think it really destroys a lot of happy, good lives and a lot of entrepreneurship as per that. I've worked like a donkey myself as well. Obviously, I can spend 16 hours just reading a specific document, getting it done. No issues, but it's more like a sprint you need to do, and then you need to rest between the sprints. If you're always sprinting, then you can't sustain. So I moved to South Africa because it's more beautiful. I can work regardless anywhere on earth. I love India, Dilse, but the quality of life is better over here. So I'd rather outsource myself to a place where I can climb up that mountain if I want to, and I do very frequently. As such, you can balance it, and I think that is one of the I think millennials and Gen Z are really struggling with the work-life balance, and I think many corporates don't really deploy that properly. But I do think that creative or engines of disruption, right, in the IT, but also in renewable energy, I think that if you want to make an impact, you must offer that kind of work-life balance. Otherwise, you fail. Now, there's one last note I think I need to mention about this as well. I can't put my finger on it, but in India, post-COVID, working from home, it seems to me that women are much better at managing that than guys are. Somehow, the women in my team have a staying power over the guys that just don't work from home if there's nobody sitting on their face the entire day. I have no clue, but there is a specific post-COVID tendency in my company, at least, that we every single time I hire somebody, it appears to be a girl, because the productivity is just higher. I might also have to do with the fact that in India, there's a lot of patriarchy. Of course, I think that the women that get on top had to elbow themselves out of the crap, and hence makes them stronger, and hence there's a pre-selection to it. I can't put my finger on it, but in a place where work-life balance by me is appreciated, and I really encourage my team to also take that at heart, I think women flourish and men are finding their way currently. And maybe I'm generalizing. It's something I've seen in my own company.
Okay. And are there any books you'd recommend? I know you are a reader.
Oh, so many. I'm currently reading the Lincoln Highway. I don't even know who wrote it. I think it's in the recent book last year. It's really nice. It's a really cute book. I generally read mostly historic or sci-fi. I think hardly any contemporary stuff. Yeah, so I do read quite a bit, yes.
Thank you so much, Rutger, for answering all the questions very candidly. Definitely has been a learning chat for me. I really appreciate your time, and hopefully, we can work together in the future as well.